Good morning, or this time morning, it's afternoon. Good morning, or this time morning, it's afternoon. Blame the person who wrote this. Blame the person who wrote this. This city is home to big corporations, but its heart and backbone have always been the rights. Backbone have always been the rights of New Yorkers, and to best reflect their needs. It is equally important that our government is complex nonetheless, as we try to be and become a more inclusive and accessible city. Plenty of them small business, which my co-chair will speak about in just a bit. In addition to the three bills being joined us today, I'll now pass it along to Chair Felice for his opening statement.
Natasha Williams, and I'd also like to thank the representatives from the administration, members of the public, and my council colleagues who have joined us here today. The small business landscape of New York City is one of a kind. It inspires entrepreneurship for so many. In fact, according to the New York City Economic Development Corporation, between October 2021 and September 2023, more than 62,000 new small businesses opened in New York City. This is roughly 10,000 more businesses than opened in the 2 years prior to the pandemic. The resiliency of small business community should not be understated, and this rapid growth post-pandemic proves that. But the barriers faced by small businesses to comply with exactly all the applicable laws can be significant, especially when those laws are complicated and complex. One legal area that has proved complicated for small businesses is accessibility compliance. In New York City, small businesses have to comply with the Federal Americans with Disabilities Act, as well as a number of local laws facilitating accessibility. It is undeniable that these laws, especially the ADA, are groundbreaking for people with disabilities, and these protections should be preserved. But for so many small business owners, accessibility laws are unfamiliar, complicated, or costly. Supporting small business compliance with these laws is important and requires education, financial support, and access to legal services. We look forward to hearing from SBS about their work to provide these services to small businesses to ensure that they're making their spaces, their web pages, their workforce accessible for all. With that goal in mind, the Committee on Small Business will hear three bills today. The first, Introduction 282, sponsored by Councilmember Menon, who has joined us today, which would require the City of New York to establish a fund providing loans, grants, in-kind services, in-kind materials, or some combination to make small business storefronts accessible to people with disabilities. Small businesses of 100 employees or fewer and 3 locations or fewer would be eligible for the fund. The second bill, Introduction 639, sponsored by Public Advocate Williams, who has also joined us, would require that the Department of Small Business Services provide training and information to small businesses about how to make workplaces more accessible and inclusive for workers with disabilities, and resources that can help small businesses increase accessibility, provide accommodations, and hire workers with disabilities. The third bill we'll hear is from Councilmember Narcisse, which would require the Commissioner of Small Business Services to expand offerings of the Department of Small Business Services Legal Services Program to include individualized, free of charge legal assistance through a designated organization for small business tenants on compliance with federal, state, and city laws on making their businesses accessible to people with disabilities. I'm grateful to Council Members Menon and Narcisse and Public Advocate Williams for introducing these bills to support our small business accessibility, and we look forward to hearing from the administration about these bills. I would also like to thank Luciano Hamel and Rebecca Barilla from Central Staff for their work in putting this hearing together, as well as my own Chief of Staff, Esperanza Diaz, my Deputy Chief of Staff, Guillermo Rodriguez, my Budget Director, Santiago Baena, and everyone for working in the background to make this hearing possible. Now I'll turn it back to Councilmember Natasha Williams, who's co-chairing this hearing.
Yes, and we've been joined by a few members who wanted to speak on the bill, so I will turn it to Councilmember Menon to speak on her bill.
Thank you so much, Chair Williams and Chair Felice, for holding today's important hearing. New York City is home to around 183,000 small businesses, with over 1,000 more today than before the pandemic. Yet there remain several challenges for small businesses to continue operating in our city that range from an increase in costs as a result of federal tariffs to navigating the many rules and regulations of the city. An issue that businesses face is accessible storefronts, which can be a major issue for New Yorkers wishing to access the city's many businesses. There are nearly 1 million New Yorkers, or around 8% of the city's population, who are disabled, according to the Mayor's Office for People with Disabilities. All New Yorkers deserve an accessible city, and both the New York City Human Rights Law as well as the Americans with Disabilities Act ensure that. Businesses have legal and financial risks for failure to be accessible, but so many businesses are not accessible due to significant compliance-related costs. My bill, Intro 282, would change that. The bill specifically allows for an agency chosen by the mayor to create a fund of loans or grants, for example, for small businesses and landlords to work together to perform accessibility projects. It creates a timeline of at most 90 days for applications to be reviewed, accepted, or denied, and funds of up to $250,000 per storefront to be dispersed. In summary, the bill ensures the city gives a much-needed financial opportunity to cover the costs of accessibility projects for our small businesses. Unfortunately, we've had bad actors who target businesses with frivolous lawsuits. In fact, one individual has filed 113 federal ADA lawsuits against businesses since 2018. Some of these lawsuits happen years after the person visits the businesses, and many small businesses are forced to settle because they, quite frankly, lack the resources to litigate in court. Businesses should be encouraged to make accessibility a priority that beautifies their storefront, but not through the threat of federal lawsuits. I want to thank the chairs for allowing me to speak, and I want to thank drafter Nicole Kata and thank my team, Jonathan Shutt, Brandon Jordan, and Mercedes Anderson. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Councilmember Menon. I'd also like to acknowledge Councilmembers Narcisse, Marte, and Botcher, who briefly stepped out. Now, let's hear from Councilmember Narcisse, who has one of the bills before this committee.
Good morning, good afternoon, and thank you, chairs, for allowing me to speak here, and of course, the administration that's here to listen and see how we can cooperate and collaborate to make New York City small businesses life easier, or each and every store that we see, each storefront in New York City, bring that kind of zest to the city. That's why people want to visit our city. So we have to keep in count that a lot of small businesses, it's very hard to survive, especially after this post-height of this pandemic. We still have COVID going around, but not as much. Thank God for that. So I want to say thank you to all of you that are willing to listen to see how we're going to make it happen. We all agree that accessibility is essential, but for many small businesses owners, especially those without legal teams, understanding and complying with the law can be really overwhelming. Especially small, tiny businesses. Intro 1260 expands on the city's legal assistance program to cover accessibility compliance, giving small businesses the support they need to meet the law before they are put at a costly lawsuits. It is the practical steps that helps our businesses avoid penalties, protect their livelihoods, because we know that that's investment, and it will better serve all New Yorkers, including people with disabilities. I respectfully ask for your support and how we're going to make that happen for the of our community and the city at large. So thank you, chairs.
Thank you so much, Council Member. Now I'll pass it on to our Public Advocate, Jumani Williams, for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As mentioned, my name is Jumani Williams, Public Advocate, City of New York. Thank you, Chair Felice and Chair Williams, for holding this hearing. As New York and the rest of the country continues to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic, one of the bright lights on our path forward is the resurgence of small businesses. A year ago, in May 2024, Mayor Adams and New York City Economic Development Corporation, EDC, then President Andrew Kimball, presented a report claiming New York City is now home to over 183,000 small businesses, a record high. However, many New York City residents find obstacles with obtaining a traditional job, or they have not been able to attain a license to legally operate a business. People with disabilities may also face multifaceted employment discrimination, such as sub-minimum wage discrimination. The pandemic forever changed how people work, and as New York City transitioned into hybrid work in many industries, the new New York panel was created by Mayor Adams and Governor Hochul to develop goals to help the city recover. One goal the panel prioritizes is making it easier for New Yorkers to get to work. Strengthening workspaces and employment hubs is key to connecting to all New Yorkers who want to work, especially those who may have physical limitations. Intro 0639 requires small business services to provide training and information to small businesses about how to make workplaces more accessible and inclusive for workers with disabilities. SBS has a total of 18 Workforce One career centers across the 5 boroughs where they can educate small business owners and share available resources. SBS has also held a small business expo over the last 2 years, which can serve as another opportunity to do this work. The Trump administration has sought to end programs and policies that consider diversity, equity, and inclusion, the very things that make our community stronger, which aim to prevent discrimination against people with disabilities. With a lack of accountability and concrete guidelines from our federal agencies, SBS could find itself with a prominent role to play in connecting small business employers to all employees that want meaningful work. I'd also like to ask that my name be added to both of my colleagues' bills here today, and I do want to lift up what Councilman Menon was saying, which has been a huge scourge of lawsuits, unnecessary, and even the leaders in the disability community are asking us to do something about it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Public Advocate. I'd also like to acknowledge Councilmember Sandra Ong, who has joined us via Zoom. I'll now turn it over to the Committee Council to administer the oath before we hear from the mayoral administration.
We will now hear testimony from the administration, and before we begin, I will administer the affirmation. Today, we have been joined by Kitty Chan, SBS Deputy Commissioner of Business Services, Haris Khan, SBS Acting Chief of Staff, Joanne Kamouf Ward, CCHR Deputy Commissioner, Policy and External Affairs, and Michael Griffin, CCHR Policy Counsel. Panelists, please raise your right hand. Do you affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth before these committees, and to respond honestly to council member questions?
I do.
I do.
Thank you. You may begin when ready.
Great. Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Felice, Chair Williams, members of the City Council Committee on Small Businesses and Civil and Human Rights, as well as committee staff and Public Advocate Williams. Thank you so much for convening today's hearing. As already mentioned, I'm Joanne Kamouf Ward, Deputy Commissioner for Policy and External Affairs at the New York City Commission on Human Rights, and I'm joined by my colleague Michael Griffin, as well as Kitty Chan and Haris Khan from Small Business Services. The Commission on Human Rights is dedicated to ensuring New Yorkers can live and work free from discrimination. We appreciate today's opportunity to highlight how the New York City human rights law protects against disability discrimination and how we educate the public about their rights and responsibilities. More details about the agency's mandate and structure are in the written testimony that I provided, but I am aiming to be briefer than usual today, so we can get to the heart of the conversation about the work that we all do and want to do together. The New York City human rights law protects New Yorkers against discrimination on the basis of over 25 protected categories. That includes protecting people from disabilities from discrimination in employment, housing, and public accommodations. The law aims to achieve independent and equal access to all aspects of city life and requires that covered entities, housing providers, employers, and places of public accommodation provide reasonable accommodations unless doing so creates an undue hardship. As was mentioned already by council and the public advocate, nearly 1 million New Yorkers live with a disability, and that means accessibility is essential to the city's civic and economic life. CCHR promotes accessibility and inclusion through targeted education, outreach, and partnerships, including close collaboration with organizations led by and serving people with disabilities. Our Human Rights Law 101 training includes disability protections in all areas of our jurisdiction, and we also offer in-depth trainings focused on accessibility in housing and public places. In fiscal year 24, we hosted 375 trainings that covered disability protections under the New York City Human Rights Law, up from about 260 in the prior year. And through our trainings on employment protections and disability protections in housing and public places, we reached over 10,000 New Yorkers. This reach included workforce development centers, chambers of commerce, nonprofits, and unions. And CCHR is proud to say that our collaborations in this area continue to expand. In fiscal year 24, we partnered with Project Access for All to co-host a Disability Unite Festival, which brought together over 5,000 participants. We also joined the Disability Pride Parade, reaffirming our commitment to the rights of people with disabilities and their full identities in New York City. Our outreach spans across all 5 boroughs, and business corridor outreach in the last year has included Jackson Heights, Jerome Avenue, Little Yemen, City Island, and other business corridors. We regularly engage, as mentioned, with chambers of commerce, merchants associations, and business improvement districts. The Commission also works closely with small business services and participating in initiatives that are run by SBS, such as the AAPI Small Business Task Force, and also already mentioned the Small Business Expo, which is coming up later this month. Turning in greater detail to the human rights law itself, the New York City Human Rights Law defines disability broadly to cover physical, medical, mental, or psychological impairments, whether they are apparent or not. The law prohibits discrimination and retaliation by employers, housing providers, and public accommodations based on actual or perceived disability. The law also mandates reasonable accommodations unless covered entities can show that providing an accommodation causes an undue hardship. Zeroing in on the focus for today, in public places, reasonable accommodations under the New York City Human Rights Law enable people to fully and independently enjoy the rights in question. Public accommodations must ensure full access to their services, including accessible seating and tables, physical alterations like ramps or lifts, and assistive technologies where appropriate. In the absence of an undue hardship, business owners that fail to accommodate may be unlawfully denying access. In employment, reasonable accommodations allow individuals to perform essential job functions. This can involve schedule adjustments, equipment changes, communication modifications, as well as structural changes to workplaces. Employers, like other covered entities, must make such accommodations unless they can demonstrate an undue hardship. I've spoken about our outreach, but enforcement of disability protections is also a key part of the Commission's work. In fiscal year 24, we received several hundred disability-related inquiries and filed 116 complaints involving disabilities. We also conducted hundreds of tests related to disability, mostly in public accommodations. And to help address accessibility concerns without going through a formal complaint process, the agency's Law Enforcement Bureau has a Project Equal Access team that works directly with covered entities to identify ways to make spaces, and here we're talking primarily about housing, physically accessible. In fiscal year 24, the Commission facilitated 85 modifications to physical spaces, again, primarily in housing, through these initiatives and the work of our Law Enforcement Bureau. Remedies in disability case settlements can include damages, civil penalties, and affirmative relief like policy change or changes to physical spaces. That provides a snapshot of the Commission's work in this area. We are committed to dismantling discriminatory practices and ensuring New Yorkers with disabilities can access employment, housing, and public life, and we thank the Council for your partnership and welcome your questions.
Thank you. I will focus my questions on the commission. Okay. Could you please share with us your most up-to-date numbers with respect to inquiries, pre-complaint interventions, and complaints on the basis of disability or perceived disability?
Sure. So I can share our fiscal 24 numbers. Those are our most up to date. So I should say, just as a kind of snapshot, disability-related inquiries comprise about 20% of the jurisdictional inquiries we receive, and also approximate about 20% of filed claims. So in fiscal year 24, we had 164 inquiries related to disability and employment, 138 in public accommodations. And as I mentioned in my testimony, we filed 116 claims. 70 of those were in employment, 30 in housing, and about 13 in public accommodations. One thing that I want to note just about the difference between inquiries and claims is that this is also an area where we have pre-complaint interventions as a possibility. In fiscal year 24, the Commission facilitated 307 pre-complaint interventions. 85 of those were physical modifications to buildings, and as mentioned in my testimony, the majority of those were in housing.
Thank you. Another question that I have is, okay. So I know in a lot of our hearings, we talk about new trends, especially, post-pandemic. So has the commission noticed any trends in recent years when it comes to the data that you have? Are you seeing more in housing versus seeing more in, I don't know, a business, traditional business, maybe like a retail business?
Yeah, I think, again, the percentages that I mentioned, the kind of 20% disability across areas is pretty consistent. Housing is also with disability-related cases. Housing is a primary area where we're seeing cases. I don't think that has changed. I think there was a lull during COVID in all of these areas because people were going outside less and not going necessarily to businesses. But the trends are pretty solid across years.
Okay. Another question I have, so the pre-complaint interventions, can you talk about how it gets solved? So is it the person just provides the accommodation? Does someone get fined? If you can share how it actually gets solved.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. So pre-complaint interventions can resolve in a number of ways. There's also a couple different types of pre-complaint intervention. As my colleague Joanne mentioned, Project Equal Access is mainly focused in housing, and that can involve staff members from the Law Enforcement Bureau actually visiting a business to ensure that a potential physical accessibility modification is feasible. Pre-complaint interventions more broadly can be conducted by Law Enforcement Bureau staff attorneys, the Project Equal Access staffers, and non-attorney staff. And that will often involve once an individual has come to the commission and has stated at least an initially jurisdictional claim related to disability. interfacing with the business, the covered entity, to see if they're amenable to pre-complaint intervention, in which case the remedies would mostly be the specific relief, whatever the reasonable accommodation was, and could include trainings, policy changes or creation, and then if a business is not interested in cooperating with the pre-complaint intervention, it can be.
But generally in pre-complaints, there's not a monetary amount that's levied. The settlements are about bringing relief to the individual in question.
Thank you. The other question that I have, which just goes back to data, and I don't know if you shared that specifically, but do you have a number of complaints towards small businesses specifically? Do you break out the data in that way?
So we don't break it out that way. I think part of the reason for that is that small businesses can be involved in cases in a number of ways, as employers, as public accommodations, and from the perspective of the New York City human rights law, individuals' rights are the same in all of those instances. What changes, if it's a small business, might be the type of affirmative relief or the undue hardship analysis if someone is seeking an accommodation. But we do not track by business size. And I think, the law for employment covers everyone with 4 or more employees. So definitely a different kind of definition than we're talking about than small business services or some of the legislation might use.
Yeah, I guess I'm wondering, I don't know, do you track it by industry? How you said housing, do you track it by housing, retail, construction,
We don't generally do that. And I think, again, looking at the employment space, which is also businesses are covered in that way, a lot of the accommodations have nothing to do with the type of business, right? It's really about workplaces and how those are functioning and communications. So historically, we have not tracked data that way. We track how many small businesses we engage with on an outreach, on the outreach side. So I mentioned our disability trainings already reaching 10,000 people, but we also, do resource fairs. We do with Council People Business Corridor outreach and reach several thousand individuals at small businesses that way.
I'm going to turn it to Councilmember Menon for questions. Oh, I'm going to turn it to Councilmember Menon for questions.
I'm so sorry, I couldn't hear that. I apologize. Thank you so much. So a couple questions I have about the issue that I raised in the opening statement about that one individual who has been responsible for filing 113 federal ADA lawsuits against small businesses since 2018. What can the city do about that?
Thank you so much, Councilmember Menon, for elevating this real concern that so many businesses have struggled with over the past couple of years. We've had conversations at a leadership level, at a staff level, on the trends that we're noticing with some of this predatory litigation that has taken place. It's very concerning. At the city, we've made sure that working with the subject matter experts in the administration, CCHR on the city's human rights law, MOPD on ADA at large, we've developed a central resource on the My City business site. It's a business accessibility page that covers a variety of topics related to accessibility, including digital and also connections to services. But the ADA is a federal legislation, and those significant protections under the ADA has also given room for vulnerability for small businesses in terms of their ability to comply, and it creates a private right of action whereby even an individual that's not a New Yorker or out of state can file a lawsuit, and court practices then allow it to proceed. And so we're concerned about no matter possible, the federal legislation has this vulnerability in it for small businesses that opens up the door to the situation that you've just described, which can be painful for some businesses that are trying to do the right thing. And we've also heard of cases where a business could be attempting to and be fully compliant, but there could be a lawsuit that they then face. and have to still spend their precious time and money navigating that process at their detriment.
So does SBS provide any guidance to these small businesses who are facing these lawsuits?
So Councilmember, currently in the city, we do not have the right to counsel for small businesses, but we do provide commercial lease assistance at SBS, and we're proud that in the course of that assistance, we do cover all of the responsibilities and obligations in the lease agreement before businesses sign that lease. And so it's helpful in understanding a lease could go up to 40, 50 pages, has very complicated clauses, and our attorneys are able to break that down, analyze that, and explain that to the business owner before they agree to sign a lease document.
And then just lastly, in terms of my bill, Intro 282, what can be done to then try to help these small businesses become more accessible? You know, how can, I mean, the point of the bill is obviously through loans, grants, or some mechanism to try to offset and defray some of the costs for these small businesses.
So I think on that bill, Councilmember, we're working with our sister agencies. We're also working with the law department to better understand what would be operationally possible. We do have some fiscal concerns with that legislation as it's currently written, but we'd love to have a conversation with you further because it is a very serious issue that businesses are facing. And because it's a federal legislation, no matter what the city does in response, there will still be a case where a business owner that's trying to do the right thing, that is attempting to do the right thing, still could be faced with litigation, frivolous litigation in some cases, that takes them away from their business. They might be doing all of the right things, but still have to close down because of the way the circumstances.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, chairs.
I'm just going to add just one piece on that bill, because this is something that comes up for us, and it's a perennial challenge for New York City, is the building sizes, right? So even if you can make the front of a store physically accessible, something that comes up in cases that we see is that people then, if they're using a wheelchair, can get into the store, but they can't actually navigate the building. And that's a building code, building structure issue. But I think it's just something to be aware of as we're trying to think about how do we make New York City more accessible. Some of the longstanding buildings are just really problematic, and so if a case comes to CCHR, we attempt to work with business owners. You know, some people put a bell at their front door and they have a staff member who can deliver something to an individual who might not be able to go inside of the building. So there are definitely creative workarounds to meet the needs of New Yorkers who are trying to access businesses, but also the reality of building structures in our city.
Thank you. Councilmember Narcisse.
Thank you, Chair. What languages that are those materials in the training available on?
Can you repeat the question?
What are the languages that the materials that you're using for training are available on?
Sure. So for our Human Rights Law 101 training, this is at CCHR. Primarily, the languages are Spanish, English, Mandarin, and Arabic. That's for our Human Rights Law 101 training. We have other trainings that are in a whole host of other languages. All of our print materials are in a more expansive number of languages. So we have a targeted small business fact sheet, which is about businesses as employers. We also have a similar brochure for businesses. Those are in 11 languages. Those include Haitian Creole, Urdu, French, Russian, Arabic, Mandarin, and several others. I can find the list. But it's the local law 30, 11 languages, and all of our core materials are available in that way. And I would say for disability accessibility purposes, guidance that we have put out, which is longer form guidance, is also screen reader accessible. And when we do campaigns and trainings, we pay attention to visual accessibility, as well as when we hold events, we ensure that people are able to get accommodations to be able to participate fully.
Thank you. As a former small business owner, I know how difficult that it can be when it comes to the fees that add up, unexpected fees. And then what I was talking about, small businesses. When we say small businesses, what is for me, it's always too wide, first of all, because when you're talking about 500 to a million or 250, I always kind of find it very hard for me because you have some businesses that is maybe making a lot of money, but it's a resale business. How much that those material cost, because as a person coming from my end, you can buy a wheelchair for $4,000. By the time you sell it for $5,000, that's not really no profit. So that's the reason I'm talking about my bill 1260. We have to take those things in consideration. And my first question to you now, what do you think about 1260? How we can make it happen?
Thank you, Councilmember, for your questions. So on Intro 1260, on trainings for business owners on accessibility, we're proud of our partnership with CCHR and MOPD. We provide general guidelines and guidance to business owners on the various complicated nature of city regulations, state regulations, and federal laws when we do our New York City Business Express Service Team compliance consultation. So those are visits where we visit a small business themselves. We go into their kitchen, we look at the storefront, we explain to the business owner what are things they could do to avoid fines and fees. And I'm proud to report that under this administration, we've saved over $40 million doing that work, just making sure business owners understand the complicated nature of city, state, federal laws. It's a general service. As you can imagine, we're not able to have subject matter expertise in all of the overlapping areas of jurisdiction. Whenever there is a more curated, more specialized need that emerges, we make sure we partner with the subject matter experts in the administration, and that is in this case CCHR on the New York City human rights law and MOPD on ADA at large.
First, I have to say thank you too, because I partner with SBS a lot,
Yes,
because I want to educate folks, and so I'm assuming that you're okay with the 1260. That's my assumption. You should.
So there's already, we already are proud of the work that we do in making sure business understand the regulations. Mm-hmm. I think the question to explore is on subject matter expertise related to ADA and to the human rights law. Mm-hmm. We're unable to have that in-house. So there's a lot of referrals and partnerships that we've established, but we'd be happy to
that so much is hard for small businesses to sustain. So thank you. Thank you, Chair. Appreciate your time.
Councilmember Boucher.
Good afternoon. There's a practice that's been happening in New York City around the country in which attorneys working with plaintiffs go to small businesses and perform what essentially amounts to a shakedown, like catching them on a ADA violation, sometimes a relatively minor ADA violation, and forcing them into quick cash settlements rather than actually going to court. That's even when sometimes the infraction has already been fixed. My dad, when he had his fly fishing shop, this is up in Lake Placid, got a scary letter because his website wasn't ADA compliant, and he was able to work it out, but it was someone who was just finding websites and sending these. At one point in our council district, we were hearing from quite a few businesses who were being approached in this way by attorneys over ADA violations. And it seems to be a little bit less frequent than it used to be. But I wanted to know from you, is that the case? And if so, what has changed? Is this still a persistent issue?
Thank you, Council Member, for raising and elevating this issue. It's very concerning to us as the Department on Small Business Services. We've had conversations and engagement with MOPD on this topic at a leadership level, at a staff level. It really is one of the reasons that we refreshed and developed our business accessibility page on our My City Business site. That page has had now hundreds of views since January, and it includes a free online screening tool so businesses can make their digital websites accessible, particularly related to the issue that you've raised with your family's own business. And it's one resource that we have now in our toolbox to help respond to businesses that are struggling to deal with this issue. And so we really would like your assistance as well. We make sure that when we're in neighborhoods, we have information on our My City Business portal and site in over 20 languages. That page with business accessibility is in 11 languages, and the content there is developed not just by SPS, but in partnership with MOPD and CCHR to make sure it reflects subject matter expertise.
Thank you. I just want to acknowledge that we've been joined by Majority Whip Sylvina Brooks Powers and turn it over to her for questions.
Hi, thank you, chairs, and thank you, excuse me, for the testimony today. Just a few questions for you. On accessibility and autism, how is SBS helping small businesses adapt their services and offerings to be more accessible to individuals with autism?
Thank you, Councilmember, for your question. So on ADA, it's a far-reaching and complicated legislation, federal law that includes various topics. And so when our team goes out to provide assistance to small businesses, we're unable to provide curated information on every single variation on the ADA or even on the DOB, DEP, DCWP, or health department regulations. What we provide when we visit a storefront business is a generalized guidance and awareness on all the resources that exist, and also helping them comply with the most common non-compliant issues that we have heard about, seen, and analyzed. And so with that level of assistance, if a business owner then responds and lets us know that they're having a challenge with a particular variation of compliance, then we will make sure we engage with the subject matter experts. In this case, it's CCHR on the human rights law for the city, and certainly MOPD on the federal ADA.
Thank you for that. And on the chilling effect in immigrant communities, due to the Trump administration's immigration policies, many small businesses in Southeast Queens and across our city have seen lower foot traffic as residents choose to stay home. How has SBS worked with local businesses and community members to address this issue? And before you answer, I do want to acknowledge Commissioner Gross and her amazing work. She was in our district recently. We've had SBS in the district at least twice, but just globally speaking, just wanting to have on the record some of the work that the agency has been doing.
Thank you so much, Council Member, for raising this. And certainly we've heard anecdotally, but also from community leaders on our different task forces and commissions that we've established to make sure there's direct communication with leadership from immigrant communities as well. We're proud that just this week we announced over 4 million grant awardees in all 5 boroughs for CBDOs and also business improvement districts that are doing localized work in attracting businesses, attracting foot traffic, doing district marketing, making sure that our corridors are revitalized and are ready and thriving for investment either from local New Yorkers or tourists that come to New York City. And so we're proud of that investment, and we're proud that as part of the best budget ever, we had the funding for our commercial corridor revitalization grants baselined.
Thank you. And my last question for you is on the implementation and equity. Given the cost and complexity of construction, how would the city ensure that the accessibility fund via Intro 282 is distributed equitably across all 5 boroughs, particularly outer borough communities where small businesses may face greater barriers to applying or participating?
Thank you, Councilmember. On Intro 282, we do need to have further conversations with the law department in particular, but also our sister agencies in figuring out what could be operationally possible if such a program were to be enacted. There certainly are fiscal and operational challenges in delivering this, the intent of the bill, but we do understand the topic of businesses struggling with storefront. Accessibility is a major issue, and in the month of May, which is also New York City Small Business Month, we're going to be releasing a storefront improvement guide, which can help help small businesses understand what are the aspects of a storefront they should consider when making renovations and improvements. And we're proud to have compiled that resource, and still in development, but we'll be releasing it very shortly, but with coordination from DOB, with MOPD, and other relevant sister agencies that have overlapping enforcement or expertise on this topic.
Thank you so much. And if there's like a flyer or pamphlet available for it, if you could send it to my office, I'd love to have it.
We will
Thank
send
you.
it. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, chairs.
Thank you so much, colleagues, for all the questions. And thank you again, SBS and the Human Rights Commission for all the information, also for all the work all of you have been doing on this issue. A few questions I guess we could start with SBS. A general question, you touched on some of the topics, but what are SBS's thoughts about the current state of ADA compliance as it relates to our small businesses?
I'm so sorry, Chair Felice, could you repeat the question?
Yeah, what are your thoughts about the current state of ADA compliance as it relates to small businesses?
Thank you, Council Member. We make sure that when we do our outreach, if a question comes up about accessibility, or if we notice an issue with accessibility and non-compliance on the topic that is general and that our teams are able to provide assistance on, we do that firsthand. And then if it is a deeper question or an issue that we're unable to resolve without subject matter expertise, then we rely on our partners in MOPD and CCHR.
Talk to us about some of the ADA rules that you generally hear about when speaking with small businesses about this issue. What are some of the most common rules? Is it the business needing a ramp? Or, talk to us about some of the rules. Website issues.
It really varies depending on the small business. You know, in New York City, no two businesses are the same. So you could be in Chinatown, you could be on the same street, and one business has a very different ADA-related challenge than another business. But certainly, digital accessibility is an issue that comes up, and as well as physical accessibility with a storefront business, maybe needing a ramp or other adjustments to be ADA compliant.
Yeah, based on your conversations with the small businesses, which are some of the rules that you've heard businesses struggle to comply with due to costs, how difficult it is to comply, and anything else?
So we would defer to CCHR on the complaints that they've received with businesses being non-compliant on portions of the city's human rights law. Just through our general course of work, it is digital accessibility that comes up, and also physical accessibility. And on digital accessibility and physical, we've got this business accessibility webpage on our My City business site. We encourage New Yorkers to go to nyc.gov/business, and they can access that resource. It's available in 11 languages, and we make sure that the content there is refreshed and updated with expertise from MOPD and CCHR.
And same question for CCHR. What are some of the rules that we generally hear about when speaking with businesses about these ADA issues, and which ones have we heard are very difficult to comply? And for what reasons as well? Is it due to costs, complications, or whatever?
So for us, we don't deal very often in the ADA, so we're looking at the city human rights law, which I think, as we were saying, has baked into it a requirement for reasonable accommodations that looks at whether an accommodation can be given and puts the onus on small businesses to identify if something is an undue hardship. The reasons that might happen is architecturally infeasible, right? Can't do it. So that is a challenge that is kind of outside of our scope to be able to address. There are a number of city rules that, building code rules that incorporate parts of the ADA. One thing that we see all the time with small businesses, and really this is coming from clients, so small businesses are not calling us that often, surprisingly. It's clients who are being denied access because they have a service animal, or historically in New York City buildings, one step. Right? So looking at something that some folks might be able to walk into a store because there's one step, that's a massive barrier to someone who has a mobility device. So those, I think, are some of the frequent things that we hear about. And then the other piece, which I mentioned already, was the ability to navigate actually stores inside. So one of the accommodations or pre-complaint interventions that we might offer is a clear route of travel within a store. So that's what we see. anything else?
Okay. Has SBS or CCHR taken any proactive measures to mitigate these issues for small business owners?
Thank you, Chair Feliz. We make sure that our outreach includes business accessibility, and that means when we're visiting a corridor and a business owner flags for us some challenge or an issue, that we are communicating to them with material and information that isn't just the Department of Small Businesses, but is also MOPDs and scenes. We're constantly making sure we understand what are the most recent challenges businesses are facing. So it might be supply chain disruption next week. Last week it might be ADA, and our task forces and commissions are incredible avenues to be able to have a pulse, to feel the pulse on the ground of what businesses are struggling with.
Okay. Does SBS provide any financial assistance to businesses to improve accessibility, or something pretty new?
Something pretty?
If it's new, the providing financial assistance.
We're really proud, Chair Feliz, that over the past 3-4 years, we've provided over $300 million in lending to small businesses. Generally, the lending that we connect businesses to through our community depository financial institutions is not limited to a particular use. It depends on the loan criteria, but that could be used by businesses to make improvements to their storefronts, to make improvements to their operation, and so we're proud of that $300 million in loan financing that this administration has provided. We're also soon going to be launching the NYC Funds Finder, the NYC Future Fund, which will be another loan product that could help businesses.
Okay, a few questions specifically about Intro 282, which would require that SBS create a program to provide lending, grants, and a lot more. If implemented, what would the process be for getting those grants? I know generally some agencies, they could only provide grants through a nonprofit, aka not being able to provide it directly to the businesses. So talk to us about that process, and if implemented, how will the process look for this one, could look for this one?
Thank you, Council Member. We generally work with community lenders to serve communities that are vulnerable. When we launch loan programming, that means CDFI institutions, and make sure that reach is broad-based. And so in any loan program that we launch, that's one of the avenues we'd use as a mechanism to make sure it's not limited to one area. It's spread across the geography of New York City, reaching diverse immigrant communities, and all New Yorkers can have an opportunity to benefit from those programs.
Can you provide the loans directly or the grant directly to the businesses, or would you have to go through a nonprofit or a chamber of commerce bid?
Generally, when we stand up loan programs, we'd have to work to identify a fund administrator. That administrator would then be the conduit to disbursement of loans, which would happen at the CDFI level, so a more localized partner that could better reach New Yorkers in all 5 boroughs.
For grants and loans.
For grants and
loans. So you said generally. Are there any exceptions to that, or is that a hard rule? You have to obtain a nonprofit or any conduit rather than giving the loans and grants directly to the businesses. And I'm only asking this because we all know how difficult it could be for small businesses to have to request from a nonprofit, and then the nonprofit, it takes a very long time for them to get reimbursed. So it could be very complicated for businesses to have to go through a nonprofit, to then have to go through the agency to get that loan.
So not necessarily a nonprofit to get the loan itself, it's just they're the underwriter for the loan. So, and I'll give the example of the NYC Opportunity Fund, which was the administration's historic $85 million loan program that served over 1,000 small businesses, a majority of them BIPOC New Yorkers, and that program was administered and run by SBS. There was a fund administrator in place that partnered with 8 CDFI organizations to make sure the reach was broad-based. And we at SBS would then provide technical assistance to those borrowers to make sure they can complete their application package, know what's required, and are ready to compete for those opportunities.
Okay. Any interest charged in any of the loan programs that we've done?
Yes, all of our loan programs that the city has co-developed with the private sector has an interest rate associated with it.
And what's that interest rate?
It really depends on the market, depends on the partners, and the level of investment that we've secured for that loan program.
Can you provide a range? Is it 5%, 7%?
I think it really depends on the market at the time, the interest rates at the time, the partners that we've secured. And so it will really vary based on the timing that we're in when we're launching such a loan program, the CTL funding that's associated with it that could be leveraged for private sector fundraising.
Okay, a few questions about the My City Accessibility Compliance webpage, and then I'll pass it back to my co-chair. So the My City Accessibility Compliance webpage includes guides on how to open and operate an accessible business. Does SBS have any sense of how often this information is used by small business owners?
The My City Business Accessibility page has been used by hundreds of New Yorkers that have reached that information. We launched it in January. It's a refreshed, updated content that was developed in partnership with sister agencies. We're really excited that we have this in place, but it's not the only thing we do to make sure businesses can be aware of resources available to them. We also organize workshops, and we're really excited that on May 29th at our New York City Small Business Month Expo, we'll have MOPD tabling on site for small businesses, as well as having CCHR delivering a Know Your Obligations workshop in person. And so we're excited that thousands of New Yorkers on May 29th can benefit from these resources on site, while our partnership and resources online and other forms of workshop and outreach continues every single day.
What are the different ways that SBS receives inquiries about accessibility compliance? Is it receiving calls through 311? And also, do you have any stats related to that? And also, if people have questions about accessibility, where are the businesses directed to?
Yes, Councilman. So generally, folks reach out to us when they're interested in one of our services, not when they're inquiring about a specific regulation or specific compliance matter. They reach out to us when they're about to open their business, or they're trying to expand their business, or they're trying to get avail themselves of available city resources that can help their business grow. And so that's generally the point of interaction we have as an agency with a business owner or an entrepreneur in New York City. And in the course of that interaction, if a business owner raises accessibility related challenges, then we've got this resource that our teams have developed in this administration, the Business Accessibility webpage. We've also got some general understanding of accessibility, so whenever our team is able to provide information that is relevant and helpful, they will. Whenever the business owner or the entrepreneur is requesting information that might be more tailored, more curated, requires a deeper level of understanding and expertise, that's when we'll pass it to our colleagues in MOPD and CCHR.
So we have a few programs that aimed at helping small businesses with legal issues, including the Commercial Lease Assistance Program. Does that program help tenants or commercial tenants or small businesses negotiate leases with issues and clauses related to ADA laws?
Yeah, so that program helps business owners with commercial lease related issues. That means they could help business owners start a lease agreement with the landlord. They could help them in a renewal process with the landlord. They could also help them understand and navigate landlord-tenant conflicts and issues that are pre-litigation. And so we're proud that that resource exists, is available, was baselined by this administration. Just last fiscal year, over 800 New Yorkers benefited from that service, and that service includes an understanding of the rights and obligations in the lease agreement. So if there are pieces of the lease that relate to storefront improvement or other renovations that may relate to ADA, the attorneys are able to advise the business owner, make sure they understand what they're signing up for before they sign the lease agreement.
Do we have any data on how often the Commercial Lease Assistance Program engages with small businesses on this issue, ADA and also other city laws?
It's difficult to speak to the specific engagement between the attorney and the business owner due to attorney-client privilege, but we're proud that it's over 800 New Yorkers that benefit from this service, and certainly if they bring up matters related to the ADA as it pertains to the lease agreement, it's certainly part of the service that the lawyers provide.
All right, I'll pause here. I'll acknowledge briefly Councilmember Krishnan, who has also joined us, and I'll pass it back to Co-Chair Williams for questions.
Thank you. I'm always interested in like the cross-agency collaboration that, I don't know, I guess in some cases works well, in some cases not so well, depending on the agency, maybe depending on the commissioner, I don't know. But how does CCHR work with SBS and MOPED? Or do you say moped or do you say MOPD? You say moped, right? What do you say?
Both.
Oh.
They're both correct.
Moped. We only say MOPD at it.
Moped, respectively, when it comes to education and outreach. And are there any future plans or new additions to joint educational and outreach efforts if they don't already happen now?
Yeah, so I'll start on that one. I think we have a very strong relationship with both SBS, and MOPD. As I mentioned, when the law changes, the human rights law, right, we're looking at potentially new obligations for businesses as employers if they have 4 or more employees, or if public accommodations protections change, that's a different set of obligations for businesses. So we have historically gone to SBS task force meetings as well as to other bid meetings on a regularized basis, so we can identify these are changes to the human rights law. You should be aware. Pay transparency being one good example. And we have a fact sheet that we develop for small business owners, in particular, understanding, as everyone has raised today, these folks don't necessarily have an HR department. They are not able to necessarily stay up to date with all of the changes to the human rights law, so we try and work very closely to get the word out to small businesses. And I think SBS has already mentioned the Business Expo and other places where we do joint training. We also, our teams go out into neighborhoods to reach very, very small businesses, right? One-person businesses to say, we are small business services, this is what we offer. We're the city human rights law, here's what you're required to do under our law. Here's a poster that you're probably required to post. So to try and make it as easy as possible for New York's smallest businesses.
So how does that work, like, for the people that actually do the work? Is it like when they have their different events, do they like reach out to CCHR, or is it proactive on one agency side versus the other, considering, to your point, you have to administer our civil and human rights laws? So is it CCHR saying, hey, we have salary transparency coming down, here's the one-pager, share this with your businesses? Like, how does it actually work in real life?
I think it works in like real life, messy ways and all of the above as part of what you mentioned, right? Sometimes with pay transparency, CCHR was getting a ton of questions about what does this require, right? So we proactively reached out to SBS and said, hey, small businesses need to know what this is. It covers all of them. I think it goes both ways. It's our outreach teams largely that organize, and when big events like the Business Expo or the Disability Unite Festival are coming, there's lots of agencies who are invited, and there are interagency meetings to talk about these particular things so that we can stay coordinated. And I think sometimes it depends on the willingness of the other agencies to answer the phone or to want to partner. And I think with the 3 agencies involved in the legislation for today, those are pretty strong relationships.
How does that work on the SBS side? Like, do you reach out? Do you, like, if you have a referral system, what is the referral system? If you're referring people to CCHR, like, how much do you do? And so you can't do anything else, and then you have to refer, like, what does that look like?
Well, first of all, thank you for the question. I want to address how we disseminate information first. When we get information about any rules, regulations, not only do we educate our staff on it, and our sister agencies have been incredible in providing training to our staff, we also ensure that it goes in all of our newsletters. We have several newsletters, whether it's through our NYC Best or our Center Operations, to ensure that all this information is getting in the hands of small business owners. In terms of referrals, it would depend on how it came into us and exactly what it looks like, but we do have very good working relationships with our partners. So it's not a cold handoff; it's actually always a warm handoff from from one agency to another.
Okay, so yeah, they wouldn't have to like start from the bottom of CCHR's, hotline that I love to hate, even though it's better now. You have real people there, so you don't have to start there. You directly connect them to okay, great. Okay. I want to talk about Project Equal Access, or Equal Access. CCHR's Law Enforcement Bureau has been tasked with working with housing providers, businesses, employers, and other entities to ensure compliance with the New York City human rights law. Could you tell us more about Project Equal Access and its successes and challenges so far, especially with respect to compliance with accessibility laws?
Thank you for the question. As discussed earlier, Project Equal Access is one form of pre-complaint intervention that the Law Enforcement Bureau uses as tools to help achieve specific performance related to reasonable accommodations. In the Project Equal Access space, it is specifically related to physical accessibility issues that individuals come to the commission and raise. Project Equal Access is mostly focused on housing. It does do a small amount of work in public accommodations currently, and currently it is not active in the employment space. But our pre-complaint intervention program outside of PEA does work across all of our jurisdictions.
Okay, thank you. Does CCHR work with any other agencies to aid small business owners to remain or become compliant with current accessibility standards? For example, a lot of accessibility issues are in relation to physical structure and or location of a business. So does your agency, for instance, work with DOB or any other related guidance? Or do you refer business owners to other agencies in such contexts?
Thank you. That's a great question. And I think it's one that's very specific to each individual case. I think we have seen in the past that if there is an ongoing issue, especially in a pre-complaint situation where there is a holdup on reasonable accommodation to modify space, and some of that is related to Department of Buildings, the Law Enforcement Bureau, as part of pre-complaint intervention, can try to facilitate interaction between the business and the other agency, or we can refer the business directly to the other agency to help them understand the full regulatory environment that they have to operate in as they look to what's possible in terms of a reasonable accommodation.
Okay, and this is probably like a difficult question to ask, but I'm thinking, you know, I know you like said with SBS and Moped, you have like a better relationship, but I remember we had a hearing, I think with DCWP, about your relationship with them. Again, I just mentioned DOB. So are they responsive? Like when you refer like people from CCHR, how do these other agencies like respond to that? Because I gather, you know, there's tons of city agencies. I'm sure you don't have like this seamless, warm handoff process with each situation. So I'm just wondering, like, if you don't have that, like, where do you not have that? And if you don't have it, do you work to try to establish more of a warm handoff? Because again, you know, that's like one thing that I'm very passionate about, because people are typically interacting with government in these cases under duress. And I think it's like really frustrating when people have to be like spent around to many different people within an agency, or worse, multiple agencies.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. The posture that DOB gets involved is often we are saying a store owner or a housing provider needs to build a ramp, and that requires compliance with city building codes, which incorporate some ADA standards. So we are saying build a ramp subject to, and businesses really need to navigate that code. We are not providing legal advice or legal assistance to those entities. So it is not typical that if we are settling a case or issuing an order, we're gonna call and help the person go through DOB. It really is like we're looking at the four corners of the case, and then the respondents will work with other agencies in that arena. Where we do work really closely and do the warm handoffs is on the education and outreach and prevention side. So we'll do joint events or trainings with SBS, with DOB around accessibility in our Project Equal Access team in the space of pre-complaint or advising on settlements in cases, can consult with those agencies. But it's not as, it's not exactly in the way that you presented it. So it comes up differently in different cases and postures. But I would say on the front end on prevention is where we have the strongest engagement, at least from our point. And then in the law enforcement arena, it's really post resolution from CCHR that some of the other agencies will get involved on accessibility.
In 2018, you released the legal enforcement guidance on discrimination against people with disabilities in housing, employment, and places of accommodation. How frequently would you say this guidance is updated?
Well, it is currently updated. We actually just went through an update, so we'll be posting that, I would say, in the next month or so. It's every couple of years. It reflects federal law and state law changes and really tries to be responsive to the moment. So, for example, in our new guidance, we will be talking about technology used by employers which may lead to discrimination based on disabilities and adding new content like that. But every few years is really when we update our legal enforcement guidance, and other materials are updated either when facts or law change. So the legal enforcement guidance are our lengthiest, most legal document. Other things are updated at a faster clip.
Okay. I believe height and weight that we passed 2023, did it go into effect?
Yeah.
Have you been seeing complaints on that specifically?
We've had a handful of inquiries on both height and weight, and I think we have 1 to 3 complaints in the past 2 years across those protected categories. So, a few.
Thank you. Do you have any other questions?
All right, a few more questions about the My City Accessibility Compliance webpage. So that program was launched January.
So Councilmember, Chair Feliz, we always have had resources available on accessibility. January 2025, we did a refresh of the resources that we had, and we updated them with support from MOPD and CCHR.
And what are steps that we take to make sure that people know about the webpage, but also the resources that it provides?
It's part of our general outreach on our My City business site that we're really proud of. That means we've translated it in 20 languages. When we do corridor walks and we have our collateral, we do include information on our My City business site. And certainly when interactions with businesses lend to a question about accessibility, that is a resource that we're then able to connect them to as well. And so we're proud of that work.
Okay, not sure if one of my colleagues already asked this, but there's a number of tax incentives available to businesses to make their businesses more accessible. What steps do we take to make sure that businesses are aware of those tax incentives?
There's references to those tax incentives on the business accessibility page. That's our single, resource, one-stop shop for business accessibility at SBS that's been co-developed with expertise. We also have a business incentives estimator on My City, which could be used by a business owner if they enter in specific information about their business, the business type, number of employees, all the other things that make up their business. Then the estimator will then share with the business owner potential tax and cost-saving programs that they could benefit from. We also provide in-person consultations to business owners if they want to understand incentives that exist for them.
Okay, so there's obviously many offices that are involved when it comes to ADA matters as it relates to small businesses. What does coordination look like between SBS and also CCHR regarding accessibility compliance?
We're really proud of the relationship that we have between our sister agencies, and that means it's not just the business-focused events that we throw, the Small Business Expo certainly being one of them. It also means the CCHR's 5th Annual Disability Unite Festival last year. And it's not just the festivals, I want to reiterate, it's also the day-to-day engagement of our outreach teams when they're visiting corridor walks. It's the activation of our mobile outreach unit, which Chair Feliz, you've definitely seen our big RV truck, which we affectionately call Moby. So when Moby's in neighborhoods, there's been times when we've had outreach staff from CCHR, at least 8, I think last year, And so it's a very deep relationship here, and it's across different teams at CCHR and SBS. And even when there are news articles, public reporting that brings up an interesting new take on accessibility, we will get on a phone at a leadership level to try to understand what that means for New Yorkers and for business owners. So it's wide-ranging, all the forms that you can think of. That's our current relationship, and certainly with MOPD as well.
Okay, that was the next question. What does the coordination look like between SBS and also the mayor's office for people with disabilities?
Very similar with MOPD and at a leadership level, at the highest, at the commissioner level as well.
All right. I think I might know the answer to this one, but I'll still ask it just in case. The Empowering Accessibility Resource Guide, which was launched in 2019 between MOPD, SBS, the New York City Bid Association, and the Public Policy Lab. This was meant to be another resource guide to help small business owners understand their ADA obligations, but it seems like the page is no longer active. Will there be any attempt to bring this program back? If so, how would it be different from the My City Accessibility Compliance page? Or is it the same page, different name, same resources?
Same page, different name, updated, refreshed, and with subject matter expertise that reflects the evolving nature of accessibility.
All right. Also, going back to Intro 282, if financial funding must be distributed by an outside entity, what entities has SBS worked with in the past to distribute funding related to loans, grants, and et cetera? I'm sure the Chambers of Commerce is one of them, the bids. What other entities?
So for loan programming, we've worked with Community Revitalization Fund, CRF, as a fund administrator in the case of the NYC Opportunity Fund.
Any other programs, any other entities that are popular on this issue?
Can't think of one off the top of my head, but certainly it is a procurement process.
All right, some final questions. I want to make sure we hear from the public as well, so I'm gonna just want to ask a few more questions. The Commercial Lease Assistance Program, how is that program advertised or publicized to small business owners?
Councilmember Chair Feliz, the CLA program is widely advertised to small business owners. We have it as part of our material at the 7 neighborhood-based business solution centers. We have it on hand for our outreach staff when they're visiting neighborhoods. Certainly on our hands when we're ourselves, not even the outreach team, but all other SBSers, when we're visiting neighborhoods with council members and commissioner, we're also including that material with us. It's one of the more popular programs that we have at SBS, so it's widely promoted in all of those forms, in addition to the advertising, marketing, and social media posts that we regularly do, as well as press hits that we get on the program.
Okay, at what point do commercial tenants seek help from the Commercial Lease Assistance Program? Do they come when, for example, they're renovating a space, or when they're much more earlier than that, when they're starting a new business? And also, at what point you think it'll be most beneficial for legal advice to be made to these small business owners?
That program is an incredible resource where it could be helpful for an entrepreneur who has yet to open up their business, is in the process of ideating what their business should be, where they should locate. We've helped several New Yorkers who were in that process of ideation. We're about to finalize those plans. We're starting to look for commercial space, and we're able to get connected with our Commercial Lease Assistance Program, which provided them with free legal assistance reviewing the lease and then executing that lease agreement with a commercial landlord. And so being like the first step on their business journey, helping them make that work and save themselves from thousands of dollars that a private attorney could have charged them. But it can certainly be helpful for a business that already has a lease, but it maybe is experiencing some difficulty with their landlord, and that program can provide pre-litigation assistance to that tenant with legal representation. And so we're proud of the work. It's helpful for businesses in various stages of their business journey, and we certainly would love to have more businesses take advantage of it. So if you have any constituents in your neighborhood that are interested or could benefit, please do send them our way.
All right, quick question for CCHR. So the Human Rights Commission obviously does a lot of work on the issue of many different issues related to discrimination, including housing discrimination. discrimination based on conviction or arrest record, and much more. Talk to us about the unit or team that deals with ADA-related issues. How large is the team? How many cases per year do you usually get? And anything else about that team or unit?
So that is our law enforcement bureau. So as we talked about previously, this is a team that Commissioner Palma has been expanding, and thanks to funds from City of Yes, will continue to expand to be able to undertake commission-initiated claims. So the Law Enforcement Bureau has both attorneys and interventionists and human rights specialists. So Chair Williams mentioned our hotline, which is now live. So you call and you talk to a person. That's our Law Enforcement Bureau. There's somewhere between 20 and 40 people in the Law Enforcement Bureau. I'll see if I can get an exact number while we're here today. But almost everyone in the Law Enforcement Bureau is able to deal with the pre-complaint interventions that we mentioned, and we have the Project Equal Access team that Michael spoke about. That's 2 people, and they are focused on housing. So that is a part of our law enforcement work, but as we've talked about in past hearings, the Law Enforcement Bureau covers all of the protected categories. So really, people are generalists. And to correct myself, there are 50 people in Law Enforcement Bureau, and 25 of them are attorneys.
Okay, are there any plans to expand the team? Or need to expand the team based on the number of cases?
We are always looking to think about agency resources and identify where our agency can have the most impact. As you identified, the New York City human rights law has a lot of protections, and so thinking about how we leverage existing city resources and other people so that everyone is talking about the human rights law provisions. And I think it's important to note as well that with the human rights law, individuals can come to CCHR, but they have a number of venues they can go to. So we are not the only entity that is addressing discrimination claims, which is great for New York.
All right, thank you for the information. I'd like to acknowledge Councilmember Rita Joseph, who has joined us. A few more questions. The next question is about Intro 639 by Public Advocate Williams, which relates to SBS education on inclusion of workers with disabilities. How does the Department of Small Business provide training and education for business operations and marketing currently? And also, how would information about increasing workplace accessibility be integrated into these efforts, the efforts we already have or are taking?
Thank you, Councilmember, for the question. We're proud of the webinars and the outreach events that we organize that promotes business accessibility. We include that on our My City Business Accessibility website. We're proud of the deep outreach that we do. So we've reached, I want to share here, in FY24, over 18,000 New Yorkers, and we've doubled the number of our mobile outreach unit events, which also further deepens the impact of that work, promoting existing resources that we currently have on site. As it relates to workplace accessibility or employment, rather, we know that the New York City, the Mayor's Office of Talent and Workforce Development has a Center for Workplace Accessibility and Inclusion that takes a leadership role in engaging employers on the topic of hiring people with disability, as well as the Mayor's Office of Peoples with Disability has an NYC at Work program, which has long been held in their office and is a great resource as well for employers looking to hire from that target population.
All right, final question. Many laws and rules, including the ADA and the workplace accessibility rules, apply to more than just small businesses. How does the Department of Small Business tailor existing trainings to fit the needs of small businesses?
So certainly, Chair Feliz, because the ADA extends not just to businesses, but also to places of worship, to nonprofits, to government offices, we don't have the subject matter expertise on it, and that's precisely why our understanding is there's agencies in the administration that do, and that's why we refer folks that have particular questions about the ADA to those agencies. That includes CCHR on the local human rights law and disability laws, and MOPD on the federal ADA.
All right, thank you for the information. I'll pass it back to Chair Williams for more questions.
Thank you. Just had a quick question about future loan programs or how you structured existing ones. Is it possible to make it forgivable? Because I still think that would be a loophole in like the gift clause, like after a certain time, like if you made, I'm thinking about like the public service loan forgiveness program for like student loans, like if you make X amount of payments over a course of time, can the rest of it be forgived? Because I always think like these loan programs are great, but it's a loan, so you have to pay it back. So if you don't have the capital, like, yeah, maybe you can get the capital over time, but I always am trying to figure out ways to make these loans forgivable. So.
Right. So, Chair Williams, I think we definitely need to speak to the law department on the law, the way it's currently written, the bill, the way it's currently written. And so not even getting into like conversation about repayment and loan forgiveness, the way that it's currently structured in the introduction, certainly there's questions that we need to go through with the law department on whether it's mechanically and operationally feasible. And so certainly, point taken, we'll also add this to the list of considerations. But there are grant programs that the city, the state, and the federal government historically have launched, which don't have to be repaid.
Okay. And then a question, so you don't provide, there's no legal assistance to small businesses at all, right? Or you do?
We do. We provide significant legal assistance.
Okay.
We provide the assistance focused on the commercial lease, actual commercial leases of businesses, and that includes understanding their rights and obligations in a lease agreement, and that means if it's a 40, 50-page document and there's components of it related to storefront improvement or renovations and repairs, we make sure that the business owner, before they sign that lease agreement, understands who will be responsible for some of those costs.
So it's only when it comes to like their leasing, you don't provide legal assistance for other?
We do provide legal assistance on other matters as well, including entity formation. We help New Yorkers understand whether a sole proprietorship or a partnership or an LLC is the right option for them. We provide free legal consultations through our Business Solutions Center network. Actually, if New Yorkers are interested in accessing those services, we would love to have them at our Small Business Month Expo, where we're not only just sharing information and sharing flyers, we have lawyers that we've organized to make sure they're part of that experience, and folks can schedule one-on-one appointments with those lawyers at the expo to benefit from legal consultation on a variety of topics.
What if they're being sued? So like, you know, kind of the topic at the hearing, like, do you provide any assistance there?
So unfortunately, the city does not have a right to counsel for small businesses, but we do provide pre-litigation support, and that's the legal assistance we were able to provide generally, but also the commercial lease assistance program, which is all pre-litigation.
So if someone is being sued, how far can you go before you can no longer help them? Because you said you help with pre-litigation, so what can you do? Like give them some advising on what they can do before they then, so
anything before they're sued, anything before litigation. Once they're in active litigation, then we're unable to support them. Chair Williams, I will also point out, legal costs associated with litigation are very significant, and our current programming already reaches hundreds of New Yorkers through a broad-based curriculum and resources on a variety of legal topics. Shifting that model to litigation has significant fiscal and operational.
Do you at least have like a referral system? Like, do you have a list of?
So what we do is we work with pro bono lawyers providing our support. We are almost 40 organizations that help us with providing legal assistance. What they do is if someone does need help, they will try and find either pro bono or low bono services referrals for them. But that is the extent to what we are able to do for someone facing litigation.
Okay, so that happens seamlessly. Like if a business comes and they need an attorney, you will then refer them to this sort of resource that you have.
Yes, we work with organizations like VOLS, Legal Aid Society, NELP, and several firms throughout the city.
Okay. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, we always get a lot of advocacy around like tenant rights at council, but I find like for homeowners and for like, now maybe we can just add small businesses. I mean, these legal entities that you're talking about do receive funds from the city, but like I don't know if they have like a special practice for small businesses. You know what I mean? Like legal aid. Like, yes, my office refers people to legal aid for like a whole bunch of things, but I'm just wondering if you know if they have specific practices for this work, or like is it like is there any existing relationship, or is it that you just know these people may do the work and so you send people to them?
It's it's significant relationships and with expertise on entity formation, on contract review for business owners, on intellectual property matters. And so these are in-depth services that we're able to.
But you refer people also when they're getting sued, right?
So those partners, if they're facing litigation, then they'll make referrals to Lo Bono or other firms that could assist them.
But they are
Often
making
because of
referrals. I know you are testifying that we can't do anything about it, or we don't really pre-litigation. But I'm just wondering, somebody comes to SBS with an issue, like what do you tell them to do? Do you say get an attorney, peace out, like, or do you say, hey, here's a list of people you can try to reach out to?
So if they ask for a legal consultation, we'll actually refer them to one of these organizations, right? When they meet with them, if it is in a litigation state, they will not be able to assist them. But what they may do is through their partnerships, they may know someone who, again, is either pro bono and able to take the case, or low bono, which is lower cost. We rely on the expertise of these organizations. For example, Legal Aid Society, when we need them to do, Corporate Transparency Act rolled around last year, they found law firms that were able to help us educate small businesses on that. When we need to do entity formation, they will find someone who does that. So we rely on their partnerships to be able to make these referrals.
So do these legal partners have contracts with SBS?
No, they're.
So how do they get funded? Like if you're referring and you have this relationship, how do they? You just expect them to do the work for free?
They're nonprofits.
I know, but like nonprofits still need money to operate. So I'm just wondering, like, if you have this robust referral system for pre-litigation, let's talk about pre-litigation, even though I think for the purposes of this hearing, we really want to talk about like when people actually get sued when they're not in compliance. But like even for pre-litigation, like you're just referring to people to these like random nonprofits because they do the work, but like expecting them to do it from the goodness of their heart, even though there's like, according to you, this like official referral system. I think it's one thing if we have like resources and we're like, hey, here you go, here's some resources. But the way you're describing it is that it's like a formalized program within SBS. And if it's like a formalized program within SBS, but we're not like funding these nonprofits to do the work, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, so law firms in general, and I don't know, they require their lawyers to do some pro bono work each year. So they actually coordinate their
I'm
work.
thinking like for like a scatting, right? Maybe scatting is like, yes, we have to do this percentage of pro bono. And so of course they might work with the SBS or they might work with another entity to like assist somebody, and we have that system. But the way, unless you're telling me you do not actually have a real formalized legal assistance program, and then in that case, that makes sense. You're just kind of referring people. But the way you just, maybe I took it as if like you have a direct line, like you can refer people and people can get that help in a way that is like directly connected to what SBS provides. If you just have a running list and people can just take the list and run with it, then I think that's, I'm just trying to understand.
What we're doing is we're working with Legal Aid Society. So for example, Skadden is
That's what I'm asking, do you pay Legal Aid Society?
No, we don't.
Okay, so how does it work?
One of their partners. So for example, Skadden did in October, they did an entity formation clinic on behalf of SBS through Legal Aid Society. Oh no, actually it was Vols that actually had that partnership. So we have this agreement with Vols and Legal Aid Society where they actually are taking our referral to them, and then they're actually working with their partners to help these people.
How do you hold these partners accountable if there's, I don't know, there's like no real accountability metrics?
So these are Chair Williams, these are Thank you for this line of questioning. These are formal partnerships. So we've got signed MOU agreements with these partners. There's a lot of work on coordination to make sure that the cases that we're referring happen. We also get reports from them on the cases that are happening. Obviously, the actual service, the attorney-client communication is privileged, but that's the level of coordination with MOUs signed. And we do encourage people to come to the expo. Is just one example of how they've agreed to provide one-on-one consultations on site for any New Yorker that comes.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I'm asking you to like disclose client, lawyer information. I'm just saying, if you refer 100 people to Legal Aid Society, how are you ensuring that 20 of those people were actually helped? How do you, like, what is the relationship? Because how I heard it, I'm like, oh, well, maybe they have like a little kind of effort, and maybe, you know, they're like funding this initiative in some way, and there's like a feedback metric around like support, but it kind of, I don't know, it seems official, but not. Like, it seems like official, like, oh yes, we will refer people to you, but that's it. Like, what is the feedback loop back to the agency?
There is a feedback loop. They confirm when a service is provided. So, and that's how we know we've served dozens of New Yorkers, hundreds of New Yorkers with entity
So what do they say?
Contract review.
Do they give you details outside of what they can disclose? Like this, you know, we were able to help this client, period? Or do they, like, how do they report back to you?
So they report back to us and they let us know which of the categories that they're able to assist with, they were able.
Like what? Tell me the categories.
Entity formation, contract review.
Okay.
So it's items like that that are covered, and
Okay.
they do. And so we find out. We have a feedback loop, Chair Williams. It would be problematic. I think you're absolutely right if we're making blanket referrals and there's no communication.
Yeah, and it's also misleading to say like you have like legal assistance programs if you're just simply referring people and like hoping for the best. You know what I mean? Like, you can't say you have this program if it's not something that you are actually tracking, and like there's levels of accountability.
Right.
But it seems like there is now.
Yes.
The way that you were talking
Right.
was a little confusing.
Absolutely apologize.
I didn't even mean to do this line of questioning around this, some of your responses, so that's why I'm just trying to get clarity.
So there definitely is a feedback loop. So we apologize
Okay.
if we conveyed that there isn't a feedback loop. 100% we get information back from the partners that we work with if the service is completed, if the service was provided. But I also want to clarify, maybe there could have been confusion on the commercial lease assistance program, which is a contract that we hold with a vendor, and that's a more in-depth service.
It's more helpful.
Yes. So
So you
multiple
have that
services.
contract with the entity to help for that specific effort, but then you have a referral system that is also quite official, that does have a feedback loop to help with another range of things.
Yes.
Okay, the only thing I'll just add before I just get off this topic, because I did not mean to go on this rant. I thought I was going to be like done in 2 seconds, but is you said that they may refer people, and I just commentary, really, not a question. Like, it would be helpful, like, if you did have some serious conversations with the other attorney legal entities that are helping on the referral basis to actually like make a referral outside of what they can do, if they can, because you said they may make a referral, which means that they may or they may not. It didn't seem definite. So I don't know, I think it would just be helpful if you're referring people to these legal entities, and for these legal entities, if they cannot assist, that they tangibly refer them somewhere else.
Definitely point taken, and we'll share that with the teams that work deeply and closely with these legal service providers and providing free legal consultations on a variety of topics. So
Okay, and I just wanted to go back to the loan program because you answered my question in reference to the bill that's being heard today, but I just wanted a general understanding of the existing loan programs that you have and like how they were structured. Like, are any of them forgivable, or they all carry what? Like, on average, what are the interest rates for those loan programs? And did you all ever think to make some of these programs forgivable?
So we generally connect folks to low interest loans that are available from our CDFI partners. And so those really vary depending on the loan provider, the lender.
Is this like Bridge to Success?
It's Renaissance EDC, it's True Fund.
But the program that you have, is it called, what is, I mean, I think that's the state ESD program. But what do you call it? Where you work with the CDFIs? Isn't that a special initiative?
So we launched
Maybe it was 6 years ago. I remember meeting with SBS about this prior to being in the council.
So we worked closely with CDFIs throughout, over the whole administration. When we launch in-house loan product that the city administration is seeding, then we also work with CDFIs. But when we don't have a loan product, we're referring people.
How do you seed the money? Are you just like, so are you seeding the money to just like essentially like backfill the loan just in case someone defaults on it?
No, Chair Williams, what I mean by seeding is when there's a loan product that the city is co-developing.
With the CDFI?
With CDFIs or with the private sector in general. And so when we're in that pathway, there's like close partnership with CDFIs. But even when we're not co-developing a loan program, when we're just doing referrals to the low interest loans that are available through CDFI partners, when we do that, it really depends on the lender, what interest rates they're
So when you're seeding these loans, like, have you ever tried to structure a loan that would eventually be forgivable? Or is it only structured in a way that ultimately needs to be repaid?
So my understanding is during COVID, there were no forgivable loans that the city issued, but there were grant programs that the city and the state governments issued. The federal government certainly had a forgivable loan program.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for joining. Joanne's laughing at me.
I am not.
I was smiling. All right, thank you guys so much for joining. Always nice to see my favorite people at CCHR. Hey, Chief of Staff.
For the record, he waved back.
Okay, we'll go to public testimony.
All right, thank you again to the administration for testifying. I now open the hearing for public testimony. I remind members of the public that this is a government proceeding and that the quorum shall be observed at all times. As such, members of the public shall remain silent at all times. The witness table is reserved for people who wish to testify. No video recording or photography is allowed from the witness table. Further, members of the public may not present audio or video recordings as testimony, but may submit transcripts of such recordings to the Sergeant-at-Arms for inclusion in the hearing record. If you wish to speak at today's hearing, please fill out an appearance card with the Sergeant-at-Arms and wait to be recognized. When recognized, you will have 2 minutes to speak on today's oversight hearing topic, supporting New York City small businesses' compliance with ADA and local laws promoting accessibility, or on any other of the following bills attached to this hearing: Introduction 282, Introduction 639, Introduction 1260, or Resolution 520. If you have a written statement or additional written testimony you wish to submit for the record, please provide a copy of that testimony to the Sergeant-at-Arms. You may also email written testimony to testimony@council.nyc.gov within 72 hours of the close of this hearing. Audio and video recordings will not be accepted. For in-person panelists, please come up to the table once your name has been called. I'll now call our first panel, Christopher Leon Johnson. Thank you for joining us. Thank you.
Okay, my name is, hello, chairs, Williams and the police. My name is Christopher Leon Johnson. I'm here to support all the bills, but at the same time, I am calling on the council member, Julie Menon, to have her political club, the Lexington Dems, refund a $250 donation from Mr. Darren, I think it was Mr. Darren Martin, who donated $250 to the Lexington Democratic Club. I am calling on Vanessa Aronson, who's the president of I'm staying on topic. Yeah, to return the money, because yes, she was right, and these council members are correct about the abusive lawsuits that Mr. Jocelyn Pierre, who has filed 113 lawsuits against these businesses, but at the same time, the lawyer donated money to that political club. I'm calling that political club to refund that money or donate that money to a nonprofit that's going to be part of the intro 1260. That's going to be part of 1260 that will provide legal assistance to any small business like NYGLAG or Right to Counsel. My thing is that look, we have a big issue with I love my disabled people. Disabled people need their rights, but at the same time, they shouldn't be able to abuse these lawsuits. They should put a bill into the city council to help the state assembly where the only way you can sue a business if you ever been around, get that proof that you was at that business. You at the business, not at the picture, but you have to be like the cameras and stuff like that. You have to be at the business. You have to be at the business. That's my opinion about this stuff. So like I said, but going forward, like I said, I'm calling on the city council member Julie Menon to condemn Lexington Democrats and call on them to refund the $250 donation from Mr. Darren, from the lawyers. That from 2023 is on New York State Campaign Finance website, New York State Campaign Finance board website. So I'm calling them to refund that money. And Mrs. Vanessa T. Aronson to refund.
Has been called. A member of our staff will unmute you, and the sergeant at arms will set the timer and give you.
I'm an accessoride customer, and I'm also a member of the MTA's advisory committee on transit accessibility. This is not just an accessibility issue for patrons with disabilities, but a labor rights issue for employees with disabilities. Who may be complained to the Commission on Human Rights about many of these issues, and most of the time. They don't follow up. Over the years, I've not seen one business repair its facility to be accessible. From any of my complaints to the Commission on Human Rights and responsibility of the Commission on Human Rights. In response to accessibility and disability issues across the city. Thank you. Response to accessibility and disability issues across the city. Thank you.
And ironic that on a day that we're also have a resolution to support Thurman Justice Marshall significant from when the city has its own obligations that's not complying with. Best interest of your client. The client would be the business, and it's not complying with. Best interest of your client. The client would be the business, and not the city that's paying for the funding. So complaint in 2018. And the first time I called in, they said I didn't even have a complaint. And the second time, and then I asked for a supervisor.
Thank you. Your time has expired.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we'll hear from Jessica Walker.
You may begin.
The Manhattan Chamber of Commerce represents the 129,000 businesses throughout the borough of Manhattan, both large and small. As you may know, May is Small Business Month, and you are making a lot of small businesses happy with this hearing. Our chamber runs a storefront business coalition. One of its co-chairs owns a boutique flower shop near City Hall, and he desperately wanted to join today's hearing. But of course, this is a very busy time of year for him, with Sunday being Mother's Day. He is one of the impacted small business owners we're discussing today. His store was targeted by a lawsuit. The business was actually sued for having an entrance that was out of compliance with the federal disability laws. He didn't even own the building, but their business was named in the lawsuit because standard leases in New York have a catch-all language saying that the business must comply with all laws. So it kind of puts them on the hook even if they don't own the building. He had to pay a $5,000 retainer just to have a lawyer appear with him in court to answer the summons and clear up who was accountable and ultimately obtain a stay. And as you know, $5,000 is not a small expense for the average small business owner. And that's just the starting point, because the business can also be forced to pay the plaintiff's attorney fees, which is another incentive to move right to lawsuits as opposed to giving the business an opportunity to correct the violation. And in fact, often small businesses are targeted for that very reason, that they just don't have the wherewithal to defend themselves. So that's why, in essence, we strongly support intros 282, 639, and 1260, legislation to provide small business owners with education, legal assistance, and funding to comply with local and federal laws governing accessibility. A special thank you to Public Advocate Williams, Chair Minnan, Chair Felice, and Councilmember Narcisse. We would love to see these bills get passed as soon as possible, and we will help in any way that we can. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony. We have now heard from everyone who signed up to testify. If we inadvertently missed anyone who would like to testify in person, please visit the sergeant's table and complete a witness slip now. If we inadvertently missed anyone who would like to testify virtually, please use the raise hand function in Zoom, and a member of our staff will call you in the order of hands raised. All right, everyone who registered to testify has testified. Seeing no one else, I would like to note again that written testimony, which will be reviewed by committee staff, may be submitted to the record up to 72 hours after the close of this hearing by emailing it to testimony@council.nyc.gov. Thank you to everyone who has testified. This hearing is hereby adjourned.